Part 3, Advanced Skills, Chapter 17, Training Trackers. You will already be aware that many sections of this book are specifically geared towards helping an individual who has a training role or responsibility. Where material is germane to a particular subject, that is, stalking or observation, I have left it with that chapter. What you will find here are aids to tracker training in general and to the advancement of tracking skills. The layout of this book can be used as a general guide to the order in which the subjects are taught. With some groups and audiences, it may be necessary to stimulate interest in a practical and spectacular way by trying to follow the tracks of something alive. But even then, the preliminary stages of mental training, the training of the senses, stalking, and so on, should be taken up as soon as possible. If habits of observation are not formed, the potential tracker's keenness on tracking will soon fizzle out as he becomes frustrated with continually losing the track. The student has to be shown that the subject is a great deal deeper and more complex than he might at first think. But if he is led through the skills progressively by an enthusiastic instructor and the lessons are put across in an interesting way, it will be an encouraging challenge and not a daunting task. For example, if you ask the potential tracker to follow the track of a motor car on a soft dirt road, he will be able to follow it for half a mile with very little difficulty. But if you ask him to follow the track of a man across hard stony ground, he will lose it in under 25 meters. The training has to lie somewhere between these two extremes. I am aware of the danger of accepting literature as a good substitute for actual practice. As with most things worth doing, tracking isn't easy and requires continual practice. Trackers think like trackers and see sign where the uninitiated don't. Any environment is rich in sign to the senses of a tracker. The environment in which we live should not deter us from practicing the lessons. Having said this, there are tracking situations more suitable for the novice than others. Snow, mud, and wet sand are ideal tracking mediums, and often the best time to practice is first thing in the morning when there is an abundance of fresh sign. This chapter is directed to any person who finds himself with the responsibility of running training for trackers. There are the additional groups such as the military NCO of a reconnaissance or a special forces unit, the rural police force, especially crime scene specialists, the teacher or group leader with a background in covering outdoor pursuits, such as scout leaders. But other bodies will also find it beneficial to study tracking in a structured fashion and therefore utilize the skills of a tracking instructor. Conservationists, bird watchers, protectors of endangered species, gamekeepers, farmers with the threat of rustlers, mountain rescue volunteers. Tracking exercises and lessons. First, I will list the types of exercises and make a few observations. After that, I will give a set of detailed instructions for each one. The following are the main types of tracking exercises and instructional periods that I have used in the past to train military trackers. Observation stand, observation lane, age stand, pace tracking exercise, pace tracking lane, incident awareness stand, incident awareness lane, tracking competition, final exercise. The list above is in the order in which these activities should take place to gain the maximum benefit. The introduction to the age stand and the importance of being able to judge the age of sign have to be brought to the student's notice before he attempts the pace tracking lane. In order to make the exercises and lessons a success, the instructor has to plan meticulously. The following details are given as an aid to that end. Firstly, there are some general considerations to be covered with regard to any exercise or lesson. The following list gives the administrative essentials to ensure that any exercise runs smoothly. Obtain permission to use any land, carry out a full rehearsal of the exercise, determine what mobile telephones receive a signal in the area, these may be needed in emergency, compose a full list of equipment required of the instructor and of the students, issue a warning order giving the assembly time and place and what equipment the students need to have with them, state the aim of the exercise, be aware of the students' details, numbers, age, experience. Consider timings, travel, time to the exercise area, duration of exercise. Organize transport, meals, wet weather clothing, maps, equipment, alternative program in case of the exercise having to be postponed, transport breakdowns, misty weather during an observation exercise, Prepare a detailed set of instructions for any assistants and for the students. Observation stand. This exercise is similar to the one used by the Royal Marines, which I referred to in Chapter 7, under the section Some Exercises for Youth Leaders. Here I will describe the method of laying out the stand and conducting the exercise. First, make a list of the items you intend to use in the observation stand. Then, having selected the piece of ground, mark out the left and right of arc and the foreground, middle distance, and far distance using broad tape similar to that used to demarcate hazards around building sites, Figure 48. Make a sketch of the observation stand area. Position yourself where the students will be. Then direct your assistant to lay out the items, starting from the far distance and working back towards where you are. Accurately record on your sketch where the items are. Indicate from which position in the viewing area they can be seen and whether the observer has to be standing, kneeling, or lying. You also note why each item can be seen: shape, shine, shadow, spacing, silhouette, and movement. Other points to note are: all items should be listed and laid out in a sequence so that you do not lose any. Instructor's sketch map will not be numbered until he gets on the ground and lays the equipment out because he may change his mind about placement of the items. The kit list is only a guide. Put out what you think will most benefit the students. When everything is ready for the students, call them forward and brief them about the limits of the area they are expected to observe and their limits of movement, that is, within the viewing area only. Give the students a copy of the bare sketch map or ask them to produce their own, depending on the time available and the training carried out up to this point. Inform the group that they will have to move about within the viewing area and adopt various positions to see all the items. Tell them what is required of them. They must place each item on the sketch map, describe it, and give a distance to it. Remind them to put their names on their papers, that referring or talking is not allowed, that they have 5 minutes to tune in, then set them a time limit, and inform them that they will be given a 10 and 5-minute warning to indicate the approaching end of their allotted time. After the test, collect the papers and, in conjunction with your partner, indicate to the students, starting from the distance, where and what the items are. Remember, this part of the exercise is an important part of the learning process, so don't rush it. The usual method is that the assistant stands behind the item and he then points to it. If there are students who still cannot see it, they are encouraged to change stance, to move, and to carry out the figure-8 search with their eyes around the object. After a few minutes, the assistant slowly lifts the item. It is convenient if the first item is a rucksack or a bag so that the rest can be stowed in it as they are collected. As with any training, gradually build up the students' confidence by keeping the standard within their grasp. A careful analysis of the papers is then required to determine the areas for each student that need attention. For example, some will see objects because of their shape, whereas others are attracted to shine from surfaces but are inattentive to shadow and spacing. Other students have trouble with distant objects or items hanging from branches. Observation lane. This exercise is a development of the preceding, but in this case a lane is delineated either by tape, as previously, or by the bounds of an obvious track, which the students are not allowed to stray from. The length of an observation lane is usually about 50 to 100 meters. The items are outside the boundaries of the track, Figure 49. The students can set off as a group, or the exercise can be conducted individually. Either way, there should be no conferring, and if the students are going through as individuals, those who have finished the exercise should be isolated from the others. Again, the debrief is very important. The same procedure as before should be used, where an assistant indicates the items and the students are given a second chance to try their observational skills. To add variety, the lane can be live aspects such as smoke from a fire, men occupying a camp, and people talking. Age stand. A full description of this training technique is given in Chapter 14. Pace tracking exercise. As we stated in the definitions in Chapter 2, this is pace for pace tracking carried out during the tuning in period or when the track becomes difficult to pursue. Remember, as an instructor, to select the tracking medium suitable to the standard of your student. Mud, snow, and sand for the beginner, dew-laden grass in the early morning at a later stage, leading to hard-packed dry earth and rock for the accomplished student. It will be mainly ground sign that you will be following when pace tracking. You have to start from a known quarry sign, whether it is conclusive or substantiating sign. Then make a comprehensive study of that particular sign to gain as much information as you can: direction, size of print, width, depth, left or right foot, fore or hind in the case of an animal, sex, and age. Once you've taken all these into consideration, your next task will be to find the next sign. Let's run through and use an example. Figure 5-0. In this case, there is a conclusive sign made by a human's right shoe. A, box 1, from your position. B, look forward from the end of your toes and the width of your body to a maximum distance of 1 meter. Look to the obvious area where the left shoe should be. C. Once you've established the next print, in this case the left shoe, place your right foot parallel to, but not on the quarry's right footprint. See box 2. Next, bring your left foot forward, but do not put it down on the ground. Sweep it from left to right over the ground between the quarry's right foot, A, and the quarry's left foot, C. Now place your left foot down between A and C. Bring your right foot forward, placing it between the quarry's left and right foot, then kneel down. See box 3. The reason you carry out this sweep is fourfold. First, to establish the length of the quarry's pace so that you can adapt your pace to suit the pace of your quarry. This enables you to anticipate where the quarry's next sign will be. Second, so that you don't foul the quarry's sign by placing your foot on top of it. Third, from the kneeling position, you can get a closer look at the quarry's next sign using magnifying glass if required. And finally, to make sure that the quarry has not put an indicator pace in between C and A, which would reveal a change of direction. Once you're confident that you have established where your quarry's left foot was, place your left foot beside it. See box 4. When you've built up confidence in pace tracking, you will find that you will be able to follow a quarry at a normal walking pace. See boxes 5 and 6, only carrying out the sweep when necessary. When pace tracking, always be aware of the quarry changing direction. Look for the indicator pace. Do not be tempted to jump sign, as you will only lose the track and end up fouling the sign. Pace tracking means exactly that, following the track pace for pace, and the tracker keeping in step pace for pace. A further point of consideration in pace tracking is the speed of the quarry. In the case of humans, you should have no problem finding out if they are walking, jogging, or running when you do the sweep. The same principles apply to pace tracking animals, but in this case, measure the walk or hop of a bird with a stick and use this to locate the next print. With animals, there is an added problem, since a human has a reason from going from A to B and will generally go in a straight line. Animals, however, are much more unpredictable. With four-legged creatures, the ideal situation would be establishing all 4 prints in, say, mud, snow, or sand. Usually you will be following only 2 or 3 prints, and the direction may be less predictable. The organization of a pace tracking exercise is mainly about avoiding one group inadvertently causing foul sign for another. So to that end, the instructor divides the group into 2, say the red and blue teams. Pair off each member of the red with a blue team member. Indicate a start line, for instance the edge of a bridle path. Line the red team members up along the path at 10-meter intervals and have them counterparts on the blue team stand behind them back to back. The group laying the track make a conclusive sign and plant a marker by it as the start point for their partner in the other group. They then walk off in the given direction. The instructor ensures that the tracks are parallel for a given distance, say 50 to 100 meters, and sit down out of sight of the tracking group, who are then shown their respective first conclusive sign and are told to pace track from there. After each track, followed up with a lessons learned debriefing session. The groups then change roles. The instructor should encourage the students to be slow and methodical at this stage. It is not a race. They will learn from each piece of sign and each pace if they proceed steadily. The practice can be varied as the students improve by having the quarry putting in indicator paces using deceptions, varying the speed, walking with a stick, or joining a group. A pair of student trackers can carry out this exercise on their own as long as they set themselves a cutoff time if they do lose contact with each other. They can re-establish contact by whistle blasts or heading for the emergency rally point. See safety below. Pace tracking lane. The pace tracking lane is the next development in the tracker's training. The instructor chooses a piece of virgin ground, probably in a woodland area, but not necessarily. He tapes off the left and right boundaries, leaving an untouched corridor a meter wide and not necessarily straight. The quarry, probably the instructor himself or his assistant, then walks the length of the corridor between the tapes. He then seals off the ends with tape. The students then move down the boundaries of the corridor and record in their notebooks any observations relating to the passage of the quarry and the sign it has left. Or, if possible, the student walks down the side with the instructor and points with a stick to any sign and describes it and the deductions made from it. He tells the instructor whether the sign is conclusive or substantiating. He should be able to tell the direction of travel. These corridors can be varied to introduce groups of men carrying equipment and equipment that brushes the vegetation. Incident awareness stand. The stimulation of interest is often best achieved, especially with sophisticated youngsters and adults, by making the training relevant to realistic situations that they are likely to encounter or to which they can relate. Incident scenarios are an invaluable tool. The trainer of trackers can use the scenes of incidents to great effect. Not only do they add realistic variety to the training, but they engage the trainees' senses, deductive powers, and their imagination as they try to get into the character of the quarry. Some of the scenarios that I've used in the past to simulate the gray matter of a group are a road traffic accident where somebody is missing, a mountaineering search, a poaching incident, a fisherman missing from the riverbank, a kidnapping, the reconstruction of a crime from the sign left on the ground or in a room is a good exercise for our deductive facilities, but the setter of the stage should have a very clear idea of the story he means to convey by the sign. And of course, any number of military and counter-terrorist scenarios, such as the sight of an ambush or an attack, after which the tracker team is detailed to locate the fleeing enemy. Incident awareness lane exercise. The incident awareness lane is a development of the previous exercise that puts even more pressure upon the deductive powers of the students. The following is the administrative detail required to set up one of these. See Figure 51. The lane should be about 150 meters long over its length. The student should be able to identify about 6 sites. Each site should have a sign that indicates an activity. The sites are to each side of the lane so that the students can observe them without following the sign for the next group. The following is a list of sites with the appropriate sign to be left by the instructor. Rest site. Cigarettes, rucksack scruff marks on trees against which they have been leaned, areas where 4 people have sat, complete with heel prints where they have been resting, urination site. Meal halt. Food remains, some of the same points as for the rest site. Water replenishment site. Footprints meandering around the area, sign where water bottles have been placed down, transfer of water onto other areas. Overnight stop. 4 sleeping areas, knife cuts in the vegetation, latrine area, buried waste area, fire site. Ambush site. Vegetation bent over to produce arcs of fire, vegetation used to produce camouflage, flattened areas where they have lain. First aid incident. After an obstacle such as a steep slope or a large tree across the track that had to be negotiated, there should be a sign where a man had slipped and fallen and then limped away, sat down, and then been bandaged by a medic, some discardables from the medic pack. It should be noted that if judging the age of the sign in the incident awareness lane exercise is one of the aspects being tested, the instructor must set up the incident scenes with this in mind and ensure that the sign and its age are compatible with what is being depicted. Tracking competition. It is often a fitting finale to a tracking course to run a competition. The most effective way to organize the competition is in the form of what we call in the military a round robin, where the students go around in small groups from event to event. The layout is important because the students are arranged in order of difficulty. See Figure 52. The elements I tend to include are Kim's Game, see Chapter 6, Observation Stand, see page 200, Observation Lane, see page 202, Age Stand, Judging the Age of Sign, see Chapter 14. Incident Awareness Lane, Deducing What Happened at the Site, see page 207, Pace Tracking Lane, see page 206. Final exercise. The culmination of all this tracker training would be a tracking exercise, which is simply a group or an individual setting off as the quarry along a route set by the instructor. The quarry must follow the given route so that the instructor has control over the exercise. The tracker group then attempts to follow from the given start point, which will probably be an incident scenario. I have taken part in an exercise such as this in the Malayan jungle. It proceeded for 5 days and culminated in the tracking team located in an enemy camp and then mounting an attack on the same. The first exercises should only be 6 or 8 hours long and can be less ambitious, but to make them work, the student's standard of tracking has to be a fairly high level, and the exercise needs to be well coordinated by the instructional team and the tracking team. To guarantee control, especially with an inexperienced group or over difficult terrain, one of the instructors can travel with the tracking team as an observer. Some practicalities of training trackers. Safety. The Emergency Rally Point, ERP. To help you as an instructor keep control of the group during outdoor exercises and training, it is a good idea to instigate a procedure known as the ERP. The chief instructor designates the ERP at the start of an outdoor activity. Only he can change it, and if he changes it during an activity, he is personally responsible for making everyone in the group aware of the location of the new ERP. It must be a point on the ground with which the group is familiar, such as the point where the transport dropped the group off, a gate in a field, a tent, or a house. The ERP is not selected from the map without confirming its physical presence. The function of the ERP is that in an emergency, or if groups become split, this is where they make for. If you have the manpower, one of the instructor team or an administrative person is detailed to man the ERP for the duration of the activity or until everyone is accounted for. Group size. There is a limit to the number of people one instructor can train at various stages of the tracking syllabus. With many of the classroom lessons, the group is only really limited by the classroom, but when we commence the practical exercises, there are severe limitations. For instance, when following a track made up of a sign laid for the purposes of training trackers, the maximum is 3 students. If there are any more, the crowding causes confusion and can obliterate the sign. Stress, pressure. I have found that the people at the back of the group of trainees see more sign than the person actually doing the tracking. The explanation for this, I firmly believe, is that those at the back are not under any pressure and, as a result, are more relaxed. This phenomenon of the learning process needs to be taken into account and employed beneficially by the instructor. Stimulating interest for the younger student. 3 simple means of giving practice and stimulating interest might be suggested. First, in town or country, a small outdoor tracking ground could be carefully smoothed and different pieces of food left on it overnight. The next day, the tracks that are almost certain to appear on the ground may be carefully examined. The food selected should be such as to tempt the birds and animals that are likely to frequent the locality. Second, in the country, in the winter, there are many fields that are marked by tracks of the stock and wildlife in them. Each individual can be given a different set of prints and told to trace the animal. This exercise should only be undertaken provided the group do not disturb the stock itself in any way, and only with permission of the livestock owner. Third, students should be made aware that tracking does not necessarily mean following marks upon the ground. Birds can be tracked by their calls, their plumage, their flight pattern. Birds of prey can also be located by the bones and feathers of small birds and animals scattered below the trees where they nest. Training techniques. I would like to emphasize the fact that even traditional trackers undergo training. Trackers are not born, they are trained. Sometimes their training takes years and is very arduous. There is a great deal to be said for absorbing a subject over a long period, since it will then become a part of the person and the skills won't disappear after a short layoff. Training has to be progressive, moving logically from subject to subject with breaks and revision periods designed into the program for consolidation. Then, the subjects have to be amalgamated to produce a practical skill. These skills have to be tested under realistic but controlled conditions in order to validate the instruction. By laying out tracker training in this fashion, we progress and meld the skills without drab repetition. The secret of success in tracker training is to secure and sustain interest by providing variety. The following are some of the techniques I've used in the past with civilians. Trail as opposed to track. I'm using the word trail to designate a track that is made artificially, as opposed to the track that is made by the feet of an animal, human or otherwise. This is not the standard definition of the word, but I wish to distinguish between the tracking of an unwitting quarry and a designed tracking exercise. In utilizing trails, we work progressively from stage to stage and try to provide variety. The most elementary form of a trail is that made by scattering paper on the ground so that those behind can follow. That is to say, a paper chase. A further definite stage is reached, however, by the laying of a wood trail. Odds and ends of wool or cloth that should have said a wool trail, not wood trail. Odds and ends of wool or cloth are cut up into pieces 5 or 6 centimeters long and used in place of paper. There are several benefits to cloth or yarn. By using different colors, separate trails can be laid for each individual running along more or less parallel lines and converging on a common point. The cloth can be placed on bushes as well as on the ground and be tied to branches or twigs overhead, thus training in all-around observation. When we come to tracking proper, we will not always find all the sign on the ground, so practice looking up as well as down is a good thing. Obviously, this sort of exercise is particularly appropriate for the younger student. Progressive methods in this kind of trail can be utilized by scattering the material thickly at first, gradually reducing the number of pieces put down and increasing the interval between each. An important point to remember is that anything strange, say an early flower, can be brought to the notice of those following by laying a piece of cloth alongside it. The next stage, as far as our progressive steps are concerned, is the laying of what is known as a nature trail. That is where the trail layer leaves indications. These indications can be to supplement the sign, such as turning over a leaf, placing an oak leaf on a holly bush, breaking a twig, or by some prearranged convention between the trail layer and the following groups. They can indicate direction, for instance, by tying small bunches of grass together, breaking a twig, and laying it in certain direction, or arranging piles of stones. Figure 53 shows some example of trail markers. The last stage is the introduction of sign proper and not contrived clues such as those above. At first, the signs should be made at frequent intervals and be large in size. Then, distances between each sign should be increased and their size decreased. As the skill level increases, deceptions can be incorporated and the tracking medium altered from easy mud and wet sand through grass and leaf-strewn woodlands to rocky terrain. In this last stage especially, anyone who's laying a trail to be followed would be wise to call in another instructor to see if he can follow it before setting a potential tracker on the job. When you lay a trail yourself, it seems quite easy to follow, but when you try to follow a trail laid by someone else, it is not quite as easy. There is an obvious safety aspect for the adult laying such trails for young student trackers. The trail has got to be so designed that students don't get lost, even if they lose the trail. Age stands. Age stands are fully described in Chapter 14 and are a necessary part of any long-established tracker training unit because judgment of the age of sign is an indispensable skill in the tracker's armory. Sandboxes. With the aid of sandboxes, the instructor can explain how the speed of the quarry, its weight, and any other characteristics affect the print. So far, I have touched upon the main stages that might be adopted in laying trails, but have not discussed variety. Here, the instructor's imagination is a key factor in making any training interesting. The young tracker. The following guidelines for young trackers should be noted by anyone with the responsibility for training young people. Leave a note of your route and the expected time of return. Ensure you have some food with you. It is difficult for anyone to concentrate if they are hungry. Dress sensibly. Wear stout footwear and clothing that does not rustle when you move, and wear or carry a hat suitable to conditions. Notice which way the wind is blowing and approach the area of suspected sign downwind. When stalking, move slowly, a few paces at a time, stop regularly, and observe in all directions. If accompanied, arrange a series of signals with your companions before you start. Don't talk unless it is essential. Make notes and sketches when it is appropriate on all that you see. It is not easy to remember later when you come to make your report. Carry a good set of binoculars. If you see the quarry, keep perfectly still. Don't try to get too close. Use your binoculars to see details. If the quarry moves away, don't try to follow too soon. As a general rule, never touch or frighten away any young of the animal kingdom if you're lucky enough to come across them. Admire from a distance and then move away very quietly. Keep an eye on the time. Remember that someone will be worried if you're late. Carry a whistle. If you get lost, blow it at regular intervals to attract attention. Take all the items necessary for successful and safe day's tracking. See below. Equipment. The following suggested kit will assist you to carry out tracking tasks successfully, safely, and in relative comfort. The list will assist the beginner to be more efficient and to achieve better results when carrying out a tracking task. I use many of the items listed below and some that are not, reading glasses and a hearing aid. The general rule for kit items is, if it is of use, take it, but don't fall into the trap of dressing up like a Christmas tree. A good many trackers that I've had the privilege of being associated with have never heard of most of the items listed, never mind use them, and even if they had, it wouldn't have made them any better trackers than they already were. There is no substitute for experience. Before wasting money on a lot of fancy kit, do some local area tracking to see if this is the hobby for you. Don't give up after a few hours. I have seen people struggling for days and then it just clicks. Remember, find an easy area to start with that has plenty of sign. The kit list. Essentials. Day pack, suitable outdoor clothing, hat, woolly in winter, small brim in sunny or wet weather, maps, protected in a plastic bag or map case, flashlight, medium size with a switch that can't be inadvertently put on, Silva compass, long tweezers, notebook and pencil. Rather than pen, keep these in a plastic bag. A set of lightweight waterproofs, jacket and trousers, if not already being worn. A short, homemade flag, maximum length 0.75 meters. Exact change for the telephone or a phone card or a mobile phone for use in emergencies. Keep switched off during exercise. Binoculars. The ideal binoculars for watching wildlife areas is 7, 3, 50, or 8, 3, 40. Higher magnification binoculars are very difficult to hold still without a support, and you may want to use them in some pretty awkward positions. For a young person whose budget is tight, a pair of ex-military binoculars in good condition will suffice. These can be easily obtained from the many ex-military surplus stores. Magnifying glass, cold snacks to last a day, thermos flask with a hot drink, water bottle, tape measure, small personal medical kit, bandages, headache tablets, insect repellent, etc. Ask the advice of your local pharmacist if in doubt. Small waterproof container of plaster of Paris and the kit required to make a plaster mold. This book in a plastic bag, small pen knife, whistle, watch. Optional items, camera, tape recorder, handheld GPS, check reception in the area, night viewing aids. Remember prior to departure, Inform someone of your intentions, including estimated time of your return. Lay out and check all your items you intend to take with you on your tracking task. Summary: tracking exercises and lessons. The following are the main types of tracking exercises and instructional periods: observation stand, observation lane, age stand, pace tracking exercise, pace tracking lane, incident awareness stand, incident awareness lane, tracking competition, final exercise. Equipment, essentials: day pack, suitable outdoor clothing including hat, maps protected in a plastic bag or map case, flashlight, medium size with a switch that can't be inadvertently put on, silver compass, long tweezers, notebook and pencil. Rather than a pen, keep both in a plastic bag. A set of lightweight waterproofs, jacket and trousers if not already being worn, a short homemade flag, maximum length 0.75 meters, exact change for the telephone or a phone card or a mobile phone for use in emergencies. Binoculars. The ideal binoculars for watching wildlife areas is 7, 3, 50 or 8, 3, 40. Higher magnification binoculars are very difficult to hold still without a support, and you may want to use them in some pretty awkward positions. For a young person whose budget is tight, a pair of ex-military binoculars in good condition will suffice. These can be easily obtained from the many ex-military surplus stores. Magnifying glass, cold snacks to last a day, thermos flask with a hot drink, water bottle, tape measure, small personal medical kit containing bandages, headache tablets, insect repellents, etc. Ask the advice of your local pharmacist if in doubt. Small waterproof container of plaster of Paris and the kit required to make a plaster mold. This book in a plastic bag, small pen knife, whistle, watch. Optional items: camera, tape recorder, handheld GPS, night viewing aids. Remember, prior to departure, inform someone of your intentions and return time. Lay out and check all the items you intend to take with you on your tracking list.